Dario Durando, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Would you mind saying your name properly?
Of course. I mean, Dario Durando. Like if you play Super
Dario
Mario,
Durando. Yeah.
it's the same. They just changed a letter.
Nice. Speaking of Super Mario, how's Rome? You enjoying Italy?
Yeah, pretty nice. I mean, I just moved here from the Netherlands, and I gotta tell you, the change in weather is astounding. It is now end of October, and I'm still going around in the short sleeves. I'm actually sweating around, so it is very much of a Sorry about that.
Yeah, and I also see that you've been all over the world, haven't you, in your professional career?
I've traveled. I've lived in Europe. I've lived in Asia as well, and then eventually, with the whole pandemic thing, kind of came back to Europe, so a bit close to the old family, as a good Italian should be.
Yeah, I'm sure Mom is happy about that.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah, right. So, speaking of you being around the world, I saw that you, as an introduction to yourself, you've worked. Where have you worked? What have you done? I'll ask you instead of telling.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I appreciate it. I've worked my whole professional career in Android security. Kind of picked it up after university. No, at the time, there wasn't really any, how do you say, like a study that would actually point you in mobile security. And that's probably going to be a very intense topic about this podcast because there isn't much talk about it at all. But at the time, just picked it up as a student project and then kind of entered the industry that way.
You worked for Fortinet, right?
That is correct. I worked for Fortinet for about 5 years, and then I moved to ThreatFabric in 2021.
So Fortinet and mobile security. Do they have some sort of mobile security product that you're working with then, or?
I was working more on the research, malware research within the research team in Singapore.
Cool.
Nice. But the company itself doesn't have a mobile-specific product. So it was more detection that would go through the appliance that they had.
So how was it working, not for Fortinet specifically, but in a research team looking at malware? Like what's the life like?
It's very interesting. You do talk and collaborate with a lot of very, very smart people. Very decent hours. And you have, a lot of interesting stuff to see. And at the time, most of it was new for me. So the first 3 or 4 years were just like understanding and learning. And it was super interesting. And being in Singapore helped, which was a very nice place to be in.
Yeah, right. But where'd you get all those samples? Where'd you get the malware from?
It depends. Fortinet. Like it's a very much of a mixed set of sources. A lot of them, you have the classic aggregators where you just get stuff with rules. You create something and try to find something that already exists. You would have a lot of through the company as well. You have reports, or you would have samples that were given or reported to the company, and then you would be in charge of analyzing them, understanding what was wrong, or if anything was wrong with them. As well have some honeypots or some sort of devices set up to attract potential malware. So you have, I don't know if you've probably seen, there's a lot of smishing campaigns that are used to distribute malware. So many times you would have some device set up to look like a normal device with a couple of interesting apps, a couple of SIMs installed. You would do some sort of actual activity, and then distribute your number here and there, and then you will be able to kind of detect some or receive SMSs, the classics that you see all the time, like you have a package for you, and you should download this app to track it and stuff like that. So there's a lot of ways. It's there's no one real way. You can always also hunt them, or if you know what you're looking for, you can also hunt them in specific, in specific forums and hacking forums and stuff like that.
So honeypot for your phone, a phone honeypot.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, it's a honeypot, right?
Yeah.
You can make a honeypot out of anything, really, as long as it looks good enough.
And I guess that goes to the whole point of this episode. Like, why isn't why isn't mobile security talked more about? Like I never thought of honeypot for a phone, but of course, duh, right? But before we get into that, you're in. So a lot of people know who Fortinet is, but ThreatFabric. Why don't you give us an introduction to ThreatFabric and what they do and what you do for them?
Sure. So ThreatFabric is a relatively young company, so say 5 or 6 years. And what we do specifically, and our target is securing banking. So securing banking, I work on the Android side of things. So I'm a threat analyst. So I try to hunt new malware, report it, and create detection so that we can secure the payment. We also offer the same suite of services for iOS and web. And so our whole product is itself a suite that offers security and protection from fraud within banking, online banking.
So ideally, a bank would buy your products and then push your products to the end client's device?
So our product would be installed or implemented within the application of the bank. So like a code modification, a library to be added to the banking application itself. And then from that, they would be able to perform all the services that we provide. So detecting malware on the device, detecting potential fraudulent attempts through phishing, through Toad, so telephone-oriented attack distribution, which are in the cases in which, for example, criminals call or set up a situation in which it looks like the victim is receiving a call from a bank. And this is one of the most common attack vectors that we see nowadays, where the criminals pretend to be an operator from your bank saying, we saw this suspicious activity, or we have this new security measure that needs to be set up by you, and then convince the user to actually install the malware themselves through some links. And then sometimes to install, for example, remote access tools like TeamViewer and stuff like that. And so our product is able to detect this as well as malware with a wide array of solutions, thanks to AI, thanks to malware detection as well.
You just mentioned top threat vectors. What other ones come to your mind when you mention in that area?
Well, so I'll say I mentioned one before. So smishing. It's this is more like a distribution, but that's how malware reaches the user or the victim, and where they receive, as I mentioned, an SMS with a link trying to convince them to install some sort of application. Then you have the voice phishing, which is instead of receiving a message, you receive a call with an operator that convinces you to go through the whole process. And obviously this has but a bigger effort from the criminals, because obviously it cannot be automated. It needs to be performed by someone. You need to be able to speak the language that you are trying to convince the user to download the malware. And then you have another one that we see quite often, and there's probably a good of a mix between the previous two in terms of effectiveness. So it can reach multiple people, but at the same time, it is also more trustworthy, which is droppers. So these are applications that are present on markets, application stores like Google Play Store, for example, but also third-party ones. It's just Google Play Store tends to be the bigger and the more common one. And in this case, you have applications that are on the Google Play Store pretending to be something they are not, or something they partially are. So, for example, application for recovering the files that you lost, or a cleaner that is supposed to make your phone faster. But also these applications have a hidden feature which downloads and installs an update, usually, which is instead the malware. So they, in this way, they manage to upload on Google Play, receiving the trust or like the trusted victim have on Google, and abusing that to deploy their malware. And there are quite a few criminal groups that make distribution and making these dropper applications their their business. So, and that divides, for example, you have actors that specialize on distribution, actors that specialize on creating the malware itself, and creating this whole kind of like business-like structure that it's quite common nowadays, as opposed to what you would have before, or other cases in which you have just like a private gang that would create their own malware, distribute it, and get the money extracted from the banks of the victims.
And those groups that are behind that are the same groups that are behind ransomware and stuff, I guess, huh? They're in the same group of friends.
Yeah, I mean, they know each other to some extent. There are some communication. There are some you can see, at least, maybe obviously not in person, but there are some interactions. But it's hard to tell. It's a very distributed kind of thing. And this nature of having a business-like structure in which specific gangs focus on specific parts of it makes it hard to track, because you might be able to track down the people that are responsible for distributing this specific malware in one area, like in Spain. But then might not be the same people that distribute the malware somewhere else, and they might have no connection with the people that actually made the malware, or the people that are operating the malware, which might be some people that are just buying the code or renting the code from someone, using a service to distribute. So it's very hard to actually get everyone. And obviously there is also quite a strict methodology in which all these kind of interactions happen, through secure channels, through guarantors, and so on.
Yeah, right. Yeah, when we talk about that, I mean, they have to be big operations, right? If you're going to do like that smishing, or the example you're talking about where they call, you have to speak the local language. You have to have something to, you have to have a malware or something. So there's a lot of, people that are needed to make that work.
Of course, and then it's also, I mean, you see the activity of malware itself, and when it's active, you see there is usually a dip through national holidays. You have a dip after a certain hour, because for many people this is almost a 9 to 5. It becomes a job, and it's paid like a job. So it's obviously it's not as structured, but it is structured enough. And people will always want to be off for Christmas.
Yeah.
So.
Right. What kind of phone do you have?
I have an Android phone.
You have an Android phone?
Despite knowing all the all the pitfalls and the issues that exist on the platform, I do have an Android phone. I have had iPhones as well, but currently for the past 10 years or so, it's been Android.
So I'll ask you a mean question. Like, what do you think is more secure, Android or Apple?
Well, if you gotta go on numbers, on numbers only, it has to be iPhone. But it's I think that's anyone that works in the industry will tell you that. And it's not necessarily because Apple is more secure, like the OS and the device itself, but it's because you're just given, as a developer, much less freedom in what you can do. So as a malware developer, you have access to much less surface. And of course, like usually when you see issues with iOS, when you see attacks that are performed on Apple devices, they usually are deployed through 0 days or very specific, hacking. For example, with the Pegasus malware that was developed by the NSO, that was distributed through 0 days, and that's because that's kind of the only way to do this kind of attack, or like to deploy malware. You have other means to do some sort of similar effect of banking malware. So in Android specifically, malware is installed on the device. So it's an additional application that gets installed on the device in different ways. For iOS, we are seeing, for example, some sort of attack that resembles an installation but isn't. So technically speaking, it isn't, but then on the device, it looks like a new application. So for example, criminals would design a program that creates a shortcut on the home screen with a square-like icon that opens a web page without any sort of URL, without any sort of button, so it looks like a new application. So it looks like an application. It technically isn't, but it still provides the same result at the end of the day. It's still able to steal your data, it's still able to steal your credit card number and so on, as long as you input it in.
So attacks against iOS and Apple products are just more complex, more expensive, I guess, for the bad guys. Or
I think it's it's not necessarily more expensive, because I think this specific vector, like this specific attack dimension, isn't much more complicated than Android. Actually, it's probably less complicated, but it's just that there's less motivation, I guess, from actors to do so. And again, this allows for a part of the attack where Android gives much more freedom to the developer, gives much more potential. So, for example, Android allows to ask for a specific privilege, which is called the Accessibility Services privilege, which is a set of tools or APIs that allows the device to act for the user. So it is designed to help people with disabilities. It is designed for developers to be able to help people that are, cannot see or have issues using their phone to act on their behalf. So, for example, be able to read what's on the device, right? So if you cannot see but you have a phone, you are able to know what's happening on the screen. But the problem is that for an app is as easy as asking for this kind of permission. And that's the only step that the malware has to actually do to be able to be activated and fully operational. Because once this happens, once these accessibility services are granted to the application, then the application, by virtue of these ability to read what's on the screen, perform touches, gestures, right, and
microphone, camera, boom, boom,
can
boom,
do everything.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, microphone and cameras are separate, but those can also be asked. But the point is, it used to be that you need to grant access to all these things, so microphone, audio, and whatnot.
That's how it is in Apple,
when you
I
were
believe.
still,
yeah.
Well, and now it is similar in Android, but it happens only when the moment it is requested by the application. So if you open the camera, it says, would you allow your phone to use, or the application to use the camera? The problem with accessibility services is that programmatically you can ask for these permissions, and then with the accessibility services you can click OK. So you can grant to yourself all the permissions that you want. And and that can happen within a fraction of a second. You can it doesn't need to be at the same speed that we do it. An application can run and launch 15 requests for permissions and then click OK to all of them. For example, putting on a screen that says loading on top of it. So you just overlays a screen on top. So all this would be not visible to the user. And then you would have access to everything, and then hide your icon, pretend like you never existed, and then you're there, and then you're fully installed, able to keylog everything that's on the screen, perform actions. And once that happens, then you actually have a way to just use the device itself to perform transactions if you want, because that's the main difference. Because now obviously there's quite a lot of control, and you have fraud scoring engines that are able to detect if someone else is trying to, or someone logged in a different location from a different IP on a different device, is trying to, all these kind of little things kind of add up and make a transaction more or less suspicious. But the problem is that if one of these malware is able to extract the credentials through keylogging, for example, then is able to actually maybe at 6 a.m. when the phone is off or the screen is off and the person is sleeping, is able to open the application, open the banking application, click on the username and password, input the ones that they had already, open a transaction, perform the transaction, receive the OTP through the SMS, read the OTP through the SMS, fill it in, and that's, that is much less suspicious because from a bank point of view, it's the same phone that the same that's always used from the same IP, and it's just making a transaction to someone else, or maybe it's buying something, which
Wow, so
you cannot.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting you. There's malware that does all that.
Most malware does that now. Most like bunky malware that has come out or that has been distributed in the past year and a half, past 2 years, has been like that. I say 80% of it. Then you always have the less technical, the less advanced ones. But yes. Yeah.
So interesting. In Norway, we have something called a bank ID for your phone. So basically, it's when I log in my bank, it sends me a message, and I have to say yes and put it in the code, right? Does that still work with those sort of services as well? I'm assuming.
Do you receive it? Yeah, go.
I was gonna say the example we just used, like most bank malware, right? Where I'm assuming they're sending you a text message and they're just taking that text message, putting it in. But there's also very advanced malware that can actually read into this. It uses my SIM card to do that. I think.
Well, as long as you receive this information on your phone.
Yeah, which I do.
Then yes, then you can. Yeah, I mean, obviously it depends, and it's not extremely easy. But as long as someone is designing a malware to do it, they can do it. Obviously the malware doesn't log everything that happens at all times, or most doesn't. They have targets. They decide what's interesting. So for example, they would pay attention to stuff that happens within the Google Authenticator, the Microsoft Authenticator, to get two-factor authentication codes. So that use that, for example, to log in into your Google account sometimes. So you will have people that extract the information and then use the codes they receive on the authenticator to actually log in into your email. And that is all. As long as your phone is infected, anything that happens on the device in terms of user interface, so what you see, can be accessed. And the point is that if it's happening on your device, it's very likely that it has an interface because you need to see it. So it means that anything that happens, once your device is infected, then everything that happens on it is compromised. So you can all use it for security, and you should always have some sort of different channels in which you receive this information. It's the usual physical tokens or a second device.
And that brings me to my next point, and the main point of this podcast is why. I saw a presentation once. It was a guy from KnowBe4, and he was talking about security spend, right? And his point was we spend too little on security awareness. Fine, but I remember the graphs. It was we spend most on network security, like firewalls and blah blah blah. Yeah. Mobile security, I don't even remember seeing it on the list, or if it was on the list, it was very low. And I'm thinking, why is that? Because I always have this thing with me, unfortunately, right? So why do you think that is?
I think that people are just, the industry is kind of lagging behind. And, decisions in these big corporations, big banks, big companies needs to go through many rounds of approval. Obviously, this is when you're talking about spend. You need to have a motivation, right? To actually request for a budget for this kind of things. And we talk a lot with the security teams of our customers, of banks, potential customers, with CERT, and everyone agrees that there should be more invested in this. But the problem is that these are not the decision maker at the end of the day, or most of the time they aren't. It's it's a team that has to respond to manager, that has to respond to someone else, has to respond to the CISO. So there's a lot of steps. And approving budget is a yearly thing. So you need, there's a lot of steps. It's just slow. And mobile in general has evolved, mobile malware, and mobile in general, I guess, has evolved ridiculously fast. So the stuff that I was studying or trying to study 4 or 5 years ago is absolutely outdated now. It means nothing. So when I started working in this, and this was like 6-7 years ago, I had a phone with Android 4. That is, like in perspective, now we are starting with Android 13, and Android 8, I think, is the last supported one. So that means that like we're out in 5 years and 6 years. Everything that has been done and that is relevant now is what happened in the last 2. So obviously it's hard for people that don't necessarily see this or work with this to actually keep track of what's happening. And a lot of these people are people that have worked in this industry for quite a long time, and they have a preconceived image of what security looks like. Security in the early 2000s is very different, but also I think that is just becoming faster and faster, this change. And it's hard to keep track and understanding what the actual threats are. Also because if you're not tracking, or if you don't know how to track them, then your data about what is actually impacting you is always going to be biased, because it's not actually tracking the important things. So like you lose a lot of transaction, you seem, I don't actually have that much fraud, but it's just because you're not able to detect it. You actually don't know that you're having it. But on your yearly assessment, you'll say, we lost 15K in this. What could have been that you lost 100, but you don't know. So it's hard to motivate many times to the higher ups, I think. And that's why people are not that interested in it, or not as much as they should. Yeah.
So banks are probably I used to work for IBM, and we used to have, or they still probably have, something called the Mass 360, and it was like an MDM tool, mobile device management. That is probably the only type of mobile security conversation that I've had, and even in my time during mnemonic, right? There's nobody like comes to us and like, we have a project on mobile security. Do you think that if it's a bank, I totally understand it, because they're losing money, that they can detect fraud, that there's a business case there. But maybe more traditional companies, I don't know, any other company but a bank, maybe they just think, okay, whatever, that phone, as long as we protect their email, then the rest is their problem. Do you think it's like that?
It could be, honestly, because it's also hard to quantize the damage that malware is creating to you if you don't deal with money. I guess like for a bank it's easy, because obviously you can understand how much money is being lost based on fraud and these kind of metrics. If it isn't, then what you're losing is potentially data. It's potentially the security of your company itself against possible attacks, possible data leaks and so on. But obviously it's much harder to understand how that works, or like what the actual numbers are for you. And then it's a whole even different discussion when it is about the actual security of people and not like a business case, because that's also quite important. And I think that's that's one of the two main issues, or one of the two main families of malware currently for Android, is either banking malware or is like spyware malware. And that has been proven to be used for any sorts of weird malicious tracking from big dictatorships and stuff like that, which is obviously, but how can you quantize that? Like this isn't something that you're gonna tell journalists to look into, social right or like human rights journalists to look into the security of their phones, and it's hard. It's a hard discussion.
Yeah, so I would assume the bad guys that are actually using time to do mobile malware and mobile related stuff, they're trying to get money just like the rest of the bad guys, I guess. So they'll prioritize where they can get money, not going after private. I would not imagine there's many groups out there that are actually targeting people, normal people, and trying to install malware on their phones.
No, it makes a distinction. You have to make a distinction at that point. You have people that make malware to get money, and that operate on their own. So that those obviously would focus on banking malware because there's no ethical or non-ethical reasoning. It's just getting, making
Make that money. Yeah.
But if you see like groups that would work in spyware, those are more like almost like companies. You have state-sponsored, groups that create this kind of like spyware to target anyone really, and they sell it as a product. So I mean, you had the NSO that was mentioned before. You had the hacking team. You have a lot of like these companies that are really just official companies that sell to states, sell to anyone that wants to pay. And then you obviously have like the state-sponsored teams that are within the
intelligence services,
the army and whatnot.
So, NSO Group, the hacking team, those sort of companies, how do they make those products? Do they just sit there and do kind of play around with the phones and try to figure out ways to, hack them basically, and then they just package them together and sell it as a product?
Yeah. I mean, I've never worked for one, luckily, but
if you had to guess,
I guess so. So, like, I was reading the hacking team. No, the NSO had reported 200 people working for them. Hacking team again, like 60, something like that. Yeah. And so if you have a team, and you don't require in these cases, I'm assuming, too much of salespeople, or there's a lot of research. You don't have You don't have to go out and find clients. I'm assuming, customers. I'm assuming it's more like, you don't want to spot or show off or publicize as much what you're doing because it's illegal, at least in most countries. So you have 50, 60 researchers, obviously very skilled ones, that you hire to just find anything bad and anything that can be used, and then you keep it for yourself. So is the power of having a lot of smart people working for you. Smart people with like a little bit of a damaged ethical compass. But
yeah, not the biggest moral compass. Yeah. I was wondering, like, okay, Pegasus, for example. I think that was an NSO Group product. Basically, I don't know much about it, but it was like you got a message in WhatsApp, and that infected you. Why didn't Apple or WhatsApp or these companies like? I guess their business model they don't just give out that code, because then they would just patch it, right? Like those vulnerabilities.
No, of course. I mean, they did when it was discovered. Then they patched it. But that's the point of a 0 day. It's an undisclosed vulnerability that gets used until someone discovers it, and then they patch it. And it also for WhatsApp and mobile in general, the applications usually get updated automatically. So the patch got to most people that needed it, but sometimes for other cases, like online libraries or libraries that you use on your website, those need to be updated manually usually. So that's how they keep using them even if they get patched.
So I would assume that they when they sell those products, they don't say, here you go, customer, here's our 0 days, because that's what they're doing. They're just packaging 0 days and selling it, basically.
No, I mean they I don't know exactly how they sold it. I wasn't there, but they would probably sell the everything packaged so that it would work for the specific case, or even they might deploy it themselves. I doubt they would
give it away.
Well, I mean, it depends on how much they're paying. They might even, but depending on how it works, they would probably just provide a ready to go thing and say, okay, so now you send this, or you tell us what the number is, and we'll send it, or you use this specific program, you launch it, and then it will do all by yourself, and then you don't need to, I doubt they'll give too much documentation on how it actually works.
All right.
Because it would defy the whole purpose of selling it, but.
Crystal ball. If you had to look in the future of mobile, what do you think is up and coming and cool?
There's a lot of stuff. What we discovered. So recently we published a research blog about some new droppers that we found in the wild. And so these aim to respond to Google's solution. So this whole accessibility service that I mentioned quite a few times already is, I would say, the main MO, or like the main tool used by malware, or at least the most dangerous malware. And it has been there for quite some time and is never really addressed by Google. And then recently in Android 13, they added a security feature that restricts the access to this service for applications that are installed from outside the Google, or they are side-loaded by the user, which is how usually this malware works. So you would have a dropper that installs an application, and this application results as side-loaded for the device. And they added a restriction that stops the user from granting this privilege to the application. And then that was probably the first real sort of solution from Google for this issue. And we already found droppers that are able to bypass this by simply installing the applications in a way that resembles the one of the store itself. So it's just like installing it in a different way with a different pattern that just makes it look like it's installed from a store, and then it's able to request it instantly. And we did find a malware that is able to perform it this way. We do see quite a lot of these droppers in general, and less smishing, for example. So in terms of distribution, we have these. We have the phishing that is quite common now. It happens that this is one of the main vectors that banks report as leading to fraud. So I think that this, in terms of distribution, these are trends that are ongoing. We are now also publishing another blog, which I'm assuming will be out by the time this podcast is out.
Yeah, I'm assuming that as well.
Okay. We're also finding applications that have like a ridiculously low footprint in terms of permission. So you have only droppers that request the internet permission, which is pretty much standard for any application at the moment, and that are able to install malware on your device abusing the rights of your browser instead. So this for sure, and then this trend of performing on-device fraud. So using your device physically to initiate and bring to fruition a transaction without you knowing. I think that these two specifically this is where the malware industry has been going on for the past year and a half, and is not going to stop, I'm pretty sure.
Well, sounds like you'll be busy, man, moving forward. Just like you were in the past.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for sharing your expertise.
Thank you for having me.
And we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy Rome. Ciao.
Thank you. Bye-bye.